All right, welcome everybody to our City of Sydney's Reboot webinar series. My name is Kate Pinn and I am your host for this special series. Before we begin our session today, I'd like to acknowledge and pay respects to the traditional owners of the land on which each of us meet. As we share knowledge and learning today, may we also pay respect to the knowledge embedded forever with the Aboriginal custodianship of country. Now, this Reboot webinar series is focused on practical and actionable insights to help businesses thrive across 3 phases of business: to run, grow, and adapt. Now, Reboot was originally developed to support local businesses in the aftermath of the 2020 COVID-19 lockdown. If you can see the chat box there and you have been part of this series for 5 years, I would love to know. So we're now in our 5th iteration for Reboot 2025, and it's presented in 2 blocks of 5 one-hour webinars over lunch. Each webinar features a guest speaker, our wonderful guest speaker, Van, you can see already on the screen. It'll also have case studies and tips you can apply immediately to help you with your business and help your business thrive. So the Reboot series is brought to you by the City of Sydney and proudly supported by Service New South Wales Business Connect. And Cynthia is going to pop a link in the chat so you can find out more about how Business Connect can provide you with free, independent, and tailored business advice, which is fantastic. So that link is in the chat. Great to see some people popping in the chat, whether they have been joining these sessions before. This is our first set of 5 for the year and our second webinar. So last week we were with Jacob looking at your numbers, and this week we have a very special guest. We have Van Lee, who's here to talk about rebooting your business plan. Now, let me tell you what you can expect over this next hour with Van. First, Van's going to share a presentation for about 15 to 20 minutes with some slides. If there's anything of interest, make sure you take a photo along the way. It will be recorded, but sometimes having these photos are helpful for you to look back on. So we'll then have a 15-minute case study where you can see how some of these theories have been applied, and then 15 minutes of questions. Now, you might notice there is a chat box and a Q&A box. All right, important difference. The chat box is where you can comment along things along the way. And if you have questions, pop them in the Q&A box. So it should be along the bottom or along the top. And those I'll be saving to the end, and I'll be answering those with Van. So although we'll be answering your questions along the way, you can ask them at any time. So now we have all of our pre-conversation out of the way. Let me tell you a little bit about Van, and we're going to get stuck into this series session today for rebooting your business plan. Now, Van is a very impressive individual. She has a unique blend of experience in business strategy, design thinking, entrepreneurship, psychology, public policy, law, innovation, and organizational transformation. The other great thing is Van has worked across lots of different diverse sectors, including tech, higher education, financial services, government, energy, for Australia, New Zealand, and international organizations. Not only has she got the experience, but she's also got quite a few degrees to back it up. Some of her qualifications include an MBA, a Master's of Professional Psychology, a Bachelor of Laws and Commerce. She's also a solicitor and has certifications in change management and process improvement, and not once, but twice awarded Female FinTech Leader of the Year and a keynote speaker in innovation. So when it comes to looking at your business strategy, Van really knows what she's doing. So we're really fortunate to have you, Van, as our special guest today.
Thanks so much for having me.
You are so welcome. Let me share on my screen our slides. So hopefully everyone now can see Reboot. And let's get into it. Are you ready, Van?
Yes.
Amazing. So Van today is going to talk through 5 different things. She's going to talk about why you need a business strategy, what your current strategy is, and if you don't have one, that's okay. That's why we're here. Updating your strategy. Again, if you haven't updated it, that's okay. That's why we're here. A case study and some questions. And you'll see at the bottom, it says, please keep your questions to the end. We'll be answering them at the end, but as I said, use that Q&A box function, and I'm happy to take them as we go along. All right, Van, tell me the why. Why do we need a business strategy?
The simplest way to answer this is that no business or business owner operates as an island. Everything that's happening in the business is subject to changing factors in the environment around the business, whether that's changes in the market, changes at a global level, but even changes within the environment that a business owner might be dealing with, whether that's a family crisis or changing health conditions. So it's important to be able to adapt your business to these changing conditions, whatever source they may be coming from. And what you'll see on this slide are some examples of the different ways that change can emerge. Some of them can creep up on us, so they can happen in the background. That's what we call the invisible escalations, until they suddenly hit critical mass. And sometimes they can be shifts and trends that we can see happening for a while, but then suddenly meet a point where everyone's adopting them, for example, AI. So these changes can happen in a range of ways, and being able to adapt to them can be really helpful for your business. For those businesses that fail to adapt, there are so many examples where it's resulted in a business crisis and sometimes even the complete failure of the business, whether it's because they didn't see the signs, were in complete denial, as in the signs were there, but they just did not want them to be or did not want to change. Or even if they did adapt, they might have not have been able to adapt fast enough or respond to signs that their initial response wasn't working and needed another pivot. And this next slide captures the why beautifully. Being adaptive has been critical to the survival of not only the human race, but also families and organizations. And we've seen so many cases where even the most established businesses can fail if they don't adapt. But on the flip side, even the tiniest businesses can grow in leaps and bounds and capture an unfair advantage because of their ability to adapt. So what are the steps involved? Oh, sorry, Kate.
Lots of opportunities. Yes, let's talk about steps to update your strategy.
Fantastic. So we've simplified it to 4 key stages that we can work through. The first one involves mapping your strategy, and whether you know it or not, everyone is always already executing a strategy, whether or not it's written down on paper. The next step is to assess the performance of that strategy in the context of current changes. Then we'll make some new choices and then set you up for your next strategy update by deciding the right time to revisit the strategy you have. So let's start with your current strategy. This might be a good time for a poll.
That's a great idea. Let's ask. We'd love you to vote on this poll and then we'll get to see the results. Do you currently have a strategy written down? And I'll admit, Van, I would answer somewhat for my own business. So there's no shame here.
I suspect that might be true for the majority of businesses. And some businesses will have a strategy that was written down or developed a long, long time ago that they are now adapting, even if they haven't written down specifically what those adaptations are.
Absolutely.
While we're having a look at where everyone is at, it might be
we're ready
good.
to share.
Yeah,
Would you like to
fantastic.
see?
That's great.
All right, let's share these results. All right, hopefully you can see on the screen now, we've got yes to having a strategy written down 22%, somewhat at 55%, and no at 24%. So a beautiful bell curve here. If you've looked at this and thought, I need to do a strategy, you're in the right place. Van is going to give you a template at the end of today's session.
And you can see from those results, wherever you are definitely not alone.
Yeah.
So let's see if we can help you to get your strategy to a really good place. So what is a strategy? The easiest way to think about this is your strategy is a set of choices that you have made consciously or unconsciously in order to achieve a set of objectives for your business that you monitor based on a set of measures or KPIs. For most businesses, they're financial or customer metrics. And it's based on a set of assumptions that were there at the time that the strategy was set. Now, what kind of choices are we talking about when we say a strategy is a set of choices? These choices represent answers to these types of questions. And you might notice you actually have thoughts or deliberate ways in which you are answering these questions, again, even if they are not written down. These choices represent what you're wanting to achieve and why your business exists, all the way through to choices about what your current focus may be, and then what your next area of focus might be after you nail the current priority or targets. Now, one of the best and easiest ways to capture these choices is on the business model canvas. And this is one of the key tools that we are going to be talking about today. What's beautiful about this canvas is that it gives you a picture of your business on a single page. And in the next slide, we've got an example of what it might look like when it's filled in. In this case, we've used the example of Uber just to give you a picture of how you might want to capture all of these different elements for yourself. For those who want to go really hard at this, they also include specific metrics for each of these different areas. But you always want to start, if you can, with at least a couple of lines to capture what's happening in your business in each of these different areas. So with that as our starting point, we can now start to look at how do you update your strategy. The first step is to be able to...
Let's pop a poll in here then, because we've
Oh,
seen
yes.
who has a strategy. And I'd love to know here when was the last time you updated your strategy? Now, it might be a written down strategy. Maybe it's just, as Van said, you could already have a strategy in your head that you were obviously making decisions on something. It might not be written down. But when did you last have a look at this? Was it this year? Can't remember, never, or maybe you don't have a written strategy as yet. I'll give you another 10 seconds. You're all very quick voters. I love this. I can see all the results coming in. All right, 10 more seconds and I'll end the poll.
And if you've recently made a big change in how you do your business, that counts as an update to your strategy.
Yes. All right, let's have a look, Van. Ending the poll and I'm sharing the results. So there we go. We've got who's that updated this year. 45%. Well done. Can't remember 25%. That's probably me. And never or you don't have a written strategy yet. 29%. So congratulations to the 45% who actually have thought about it this year. That's excellent. And if you haven't, that's okay. We're going to help you today.
And sometimes updating your strategy means simply reconfirming that the strategy that you have still works for the conditions that you're operating in.
Yes, very true.
To update your strategy, we want to start with assessing what are the key changes that are happening in your environment at the moment. You'll see there that there are 4 different levels that you might want to have a look at. There's the macro factors. These are typically factors that affect the whole of your market, the whole of your country, or the whole planet. And the pandemic is a great example of this. There can also be, yes, there's for those who might have missed the beginning, this is being recorded and copies of the templates will be made available. So don't worry too much if you miss a slide. It'll all be available to you at the end. So changes can also be happening at the market level. So this could be changes in what your customers are doing, the introduction of new competitors, for example, or even a new lower cost supplier that is suddenly becoming available. A lot of businesses are looking at this in terms of what AI means for their customer service. There can also be changes internally in the business that you might be dealing with. This could be a function of the culture that you have, or it could also be new hires that are making a big difference. And finally, there can be changes in your own personal circumstances that can affect the capacity that you have to work on the business, whether that's about the capacity now opening up or an additional demand on your capacity and some tough choices are being able to be made or needing to be made. So these are the different places to look for where changes may be coming from that may affect your business. Then what we want to do is have a look at how are these changes affecting your business. What you see here is a little cheat sheet on how to categorize the meaning or impact of different changes. Some of them may be in the green, where they are changes that are giving you some momentum to what you're already doing. Some of them may feel like an amber traffic light, where things are a little bit out of misalignment, and what used to be working well together is now starting to slow down a little bit or getting some bumps. There may also be changes that can be a massive disruption or showstopper to what you had planned. And sometimes you can come across changes that present amazing moments of opportunity if you're able to grab hold of them. So those are the ones that we're putting in the magic quadrant. So what do you do with these impacts once you've identified what they are? This is when we come back to the business model. What you see in front of you is an example of how you might map some of these changes on the business model. And one of the cheats that we're using here is just a bit of color coding to help you see at a glance the parts of your business that might be presenting opportunities. So for example, here we can see with in the key partners box, we've got some momentum in the green as well as potential magic. So this might represent key partners as an area of the business that could really take off with a bit of investment. At the same time, we're seeing in customer relationships, it's gone red, indicating that this might need a bit of attention. So this is a quick and easy way to have a look at where to put your focus when you're strained for time and resources, can't do everything, but need to make a choice about what to really focus on. On the next slide is a simple approach to cut through the noise if you're finding that there's too much happening in the business and around you, and it's hard to know, what are the critical things to look for. So we've narrowed it down to 4 key things. The first is look for inconvenient truths. So these are things that are happening that are likely to be the last thing that a team is going to want to raise with the business owner, because no one likes to be the bearer of bad news. So it can be important to look for the inconvenient truths so that you can eat that frog and deal with those moments, and even create a safe space for your team to talk about what's becoming problematic before it becomes a crisis. The next thing to look out for are the showstoppers. So these are events that are putting your key metrics into the amber or red. So this might be your cash flow, for example, or important customer feedback. Showstoppers can also be changes that fundamentally change the key assumptions behind your business model. We also want to look for signs of game changers, especially if there's something there that might give you an unfair advantage, where you've got these great resources and the environment is suddenly changing so that customers are now much more interested in what you might already have, for example. And finally, you also want to look out for distractions. So these are moments where there may be that anxiety around the fear of missing out because everyone is doing something and you haven't felt that it's right for your business yet. It might still not be right for your business, and it might still be the right thing to be able to say, that's great for everyone else, but for me, that's a distraction. I need to stay focused. Other distractions could be the right idea, but at the wrong time, and also magical thinking. So this is where we come across something that we really want to do, would love to because it's exciting and interesting for us, but the actual evidence that it works for us right now or for our business may be lacking. And so it's important to protect your attention, to focus on the areas where you can make the biggest impact.
Man, I certainly know for myself, bright shiny syndrome, when something looks exciting and I want to put all my energy in it, and it might be the right idea, but it's the wrong time, or trying to really think, where is my energy best going? Instead of sending it over to all these different things that seem exciting at the time. I think this is such a great thing of distractions. I know as a business owner, this is where I need to really focus. Where should I be putting my time? And that business model canvas one page is excellent because it brings me back to it.
Yeah, absolutely. And there are things we can do with those shiny distractions, such as deciding when, at what point is it right to engage with them. And that brings us to our next slide, where we get to make some new choices about the changes that we're seeing. So typically, updates in strategy are essentially changes in the direction of your focus in different areas. So you might be introducing something new to a part of your business. You might be redirecting something in a part of your business. So if you're wondering, what do I do with these changes? You can look at this and go, okay, in which direction do I want to move? And ideally, you want to prioritize changes in the areas that give you the highest bang for buck, and also changes where your business is most ready to adopt a change. It may not always make sense to do a big change if it's going to take 9 months of getting people on board and buying into something. So those really important choices about timing also come into play here. And if you're in a situation where you can't see anything that needs a change or requires adaptation, you may be in a very lucky place where you have capacity right now to invest in improving your adaptability for if and when you need to change. You know how they say sometimes the best time to have taken on a new project or taken on new technology was 5 years ago, and the next best time is today, making those changes when it's easiest and less demanding on your business. Now, if you're not sure of what to do with some of these changes, you just don't have time to think about how to respond, a really good place to look is, what are your competitors doing? And what are new disruptors in other industries doing? Sometimes you can beg, borrow, and steal from their strategies and changes, especially if you see components that might be working for your business. Another cheat is to talk to your strategy intern, being AI. So there are some really interesting responses you can get from just asking any AI tool available out there. What's changing in the business environment for this particular industry? Or even by feeding it with, given a business that's at this level operating in this way, what are some changes or threats that I might need to look out for? Finally,
On
sorry,
that one,
Kate.
Van, I'd be very curious if anyone has done that as yet. And you'd feel comfortable to share in the chat either what question you asked it or which tool you used. I'm sure people would be curious to hear about other people's experiences on that one too.
Because sometimes it takes a lot of energy to think about, okay, how do we deal with this, and to come up with solutions? And it's much easier to be the one to evaluate the ideas or options that come from others. So wherever your strength is, whether it's in the creative space or whether it's in the evaluation space, that's a great opportunity to use the people around you, the AI tools that are available today, or even experts, advisors, sounding boards, so that you get the benefit of multiple eyes on the same question. And then finally, after you do your strategy update and make those new choices, you can decide when is the next appropriate time to review the strategy and update it again. For some people, a good time to do an update will be every X months. For others, it will be when the numbers show that you're doing super well and now have extra capacity, or when you're starting to get into the red zone. And for other businesses, again, the best time to do the next update might be when a particular event is triggered. So for example, you might be meeting a milestone such as your first $1 million, or the milestone might be your first 10 or 15 customers, being the sign that this might be a good time to see how to make your processes scalable to be able to handle more volume without losing the quality. So there's no single right answer to when is the right time to do the next update, but these might give you some considerations for what might make sense for where your business is at right now.
Van, there was one term you just mentioned about going into the red zone. What are some indicators of what the red zone would be? What does it mean?
Fantastic. This is such a great question. So with every business, there will be magic metrics. So a key number to keep an eye on that gives you a sense of the health of the business. For some businesses, the magic metric might be the volume of sales that you are
Mhm.
getting. For other businesses, it might be how many defects there are in the products that you are producing. And you will you will know as the business owner what is the number that is the sign that things are not going as well as planned and need to be looked at, or a sign that you could be in trouble soon if you don't
You don't
respond.
look at it. I
Yeah, so
know.
it helps if you set your own amber trigger to
Yeah.
give you enough time to respond, but in a calm and deliberate way, as opposed to a red trigger, which is stop everything and we are doing just this. So
Yeah.
again, as a business owner, you will know whether you are great in a crisis, in which case the red is when you do your best, or whether you are someone who needs the time to respond so that you don't have your buyer's remorse afterwards for not being able to make the decisions in a calm way. So the amber and red zone will be what you determine for yourself requires an immediate response or some time to be carved out to respond. Such a great question.
Thank you, Van. For those that were attending the session last week with Jacob about looking at your numbers, he did talk about a couple of ratios depending on different businesses that came up in the questions. So, for example, if you had a product business, but your product is costing more than 50% of what you're selling it for, and a few things like that. So you can obviously go and have a look at that session with Jacob, but your accountant is a great place to get these ratios or the numbers, and also business strategy. And if you scroll up in the chat, Cynthia added in that free Business Connect. Let me just see if I can share it again. Oh, Cynthia will pop it back in. 7th New South Wales Business Connect, where you can get free business coaching. And they can help you with those numbers too, just in case you're hearing this and thinking, I don't know what my numbers are or what my red or my amber can be. There are places that you can get help. It doesn't have to be a big, scary thing.
Yeah. Oh, that is so good. It helps to be able to have someone else tell you, is this something I should be worried about?
So true. All right.
So
Shall
shall we do a
we?
case study?
Let's. So for those, if you didn't join right at the very beginning, we can have about 15 minutes to talk through a case study. So looking at the content that Van just spoke about into a real life business. And then after that, we've got 15 minutes for questions. So just to explain the difference between the chat and the Q&A function, chat is for general conversation. The comment I made before about sharing what AI platforms you use and how you use it, that's happening in the chat. And if there's specific questions that you would like Van and I to answer at the end, we've got 15 minutes and that goes in the Q&A box. And that we will answer those because it's a bit hard to find them all in the chat. Okay, so 15 minutes for case studies and then we'll get to your questions. Let's have a look at this artisanal bakery.
That's big. So what we have here is what was a retail business initially. The value proposition was very much around quality artisanal bread sourced from local ingredients. We're going to look at the scenarios and situations and changing conditions that led to a strategic pivot in their business model that initially was about survival, but also actually opened up new opportunities for this business to grow in other ways. So this is just a great reminder that what may feel like a necessity and a really stressful time can be one of those moments where necessity is the mother of invention and you can discover whole new capabilities. So we'll start with the original business model for this business. And you can see here, this is the business model canvas template being filled in for how this business initially operated. And what you'll see on the very top line is a really important summary of the way the business worked, which is it was heavily reliant on foot traffic, the prestigious brand that it had built, and also the high quality of the produce that it was delivering. So this was the picture before the pandemic. When the pandemic emerged, there were a number of challenges that it represented for the business. So you'll see on the next slide here, there was a lot going on. Suddenly, supply chain was getting disrupted, and foot traffic, the main source of revenue, was also suddenly disappearing. And there was an immediate need to shift from what they were doing in terms of a bricks and mortar model to needing to look at going online and starting to engage with different partners to get their products out to their customers. At the same time, people were getting sick, so there were staffing challenges and needing to deal with rising operational costs because there were retail leases that were now not being able to generate revenue, but also the costs of doing the cleaning, the costs of trying to find replacement staff, and also the additional costs of developing new partnerships and new products. At the same time, you had customer behavior changing from going to the stores to get bread to starting to bake themselves and do things in-house. And finally, competition from local supermarkets. So if you can imagine yourself in the shoes of the business owners at the time, this could have been a really challenging time. And some of these challenges might have been there for your business if it was operating during COVID. So you might already be feeling a lot of this just coming back to that time and seeing what was there. So given all of these changes, let's have a look at what that meant for the business model. So here's the model before the changes, and then here's the model using our tools, highlighting the impact of some of these changes. So this is where we really get to see the beauty of using this model and a bit of color coding to identify the different areas of challenge and where a business might want to leverage the strengths that it has. So in this case, the premium quality of the produce was something that they did not want to change and wanted to hold on to. But here we can see the challenges were very much about getting that quality and the amazing experience of that bread to customers in an environment where foot traffic was no longer easily accessible. So what did they do? On the next slide here, you can see a picture of all the different changes that were made in these other areas. In this particular business, these changes were put in place over a period of about 9 months. So it did not all happen overnight, but you can see here a picture of a combination of changes that were made. And one of the things that's really important when putting a number of changes into your business across multiple areas is just looking at whether these changes are very well aligned to each other. Sometimes a change in one area may be going in a completely different direction to another area, and that can really dilute the impact of any of those changes. What you want in any business update is for all the changes to be mutually reinforcing. So you might put the first change in, and then the next change leverages the impact and the value that you're creating in the first change. And then the next change on top of that further leverages all of those other changes so that you can get a cascading effect and leverage on leverage on leverage. That's the ideal situation, rather than one where each change needs to create momentum on its own. So if there are options that keep leveraging previous decisions, you will find that every update or change that you put in will also give you that feeling of, wow, I'm getting to see the benefit of every change that I'm making, which can also be important for maintaining your motivation and your engagement, as well as the engagement of your team. We have been designed to want instant gratification. So it can be really hard if the sequence of changes are the type where it's difficult to see the impact until quite some time afterwards. So having that balance between changes where you're starting to see the results and changes where you need to be patient can also be important in just managing how you go about doing these updates. And as was the case in the pandemic, sometimes having multiple businesses and organizations going through the same thing at the same time can bring a bit of relief knowing that everyone is in it together. So I might just check with Kate whether there might be any elements of these strategy updates that might be worth highlighting from this case study.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Van. On here, you've done a wonderful job in putting numbers. And if people haven't
Ah,
seen this business model canvas before, you might not realize that these numbers are there to help you. And it's an indication of when you're completing this of where to focus your energy first. Um, so you'll notice that number one is the customer segments. So starting with who are you serving? And then number two, what's your proposition to these people? Sometimes people like to swap um, one and two around. So think about what are you offering and then who can you offer it to? But if you're looking at this thinking, this is a lot of information, where do I start? One and two is like the key to everything else. And then on the
yeah,
right-hand side, it's all about our customers or your clients. And then the left is like, what do you do to get your stuff or your service to those people? And then at the bottom, our costs and our revenue. So our ins and our outs. So when you look at it like that, hopefully it demystifies it a little bit. And Van, I wondered, let me just check. We've got a couple of more minutes on this case study before we get to Q&A. And I wondered perhaps just stepping through the numbers
yeah,
so just so people could see the order of how they'd go about filling this out for themselves.
fantastic. So number one has to be your customer segments. Who are you serving? And in the same way that we start there for your original business model, we also start there when we're looking at the changes, because it's always easier to try and look at different ways to add more value to the customers you already have than to try and find completely new customers in a completely new segment. So getting really clear on who your customers are, the context or needs or problems that they deal with, and therefore, number two, the value propositions, which is your remarkable solution for the needs and problems that they are dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And then from there, we look at if that's what you're offering, how do customers get it? How do they get whatever you're offering into their hands so that they can have that experience? That's your channels. And then we come to number four, which is how do you manage, maintain, and service those customer relationships? How do you know that the customer satisfaction is there? How do you know when there are complaints? So having that line of communication is really important. And you might
On that
notice,
one, Van,
yeah,
I was just going to add we've got loyalty discounts. We're going to talk about that in let me check in 3 weeks. There's going to be a session where we're talking about sales and loyalty. So if this is an area you think, oh, I'd love some more information on that, make sure you sign up to the future session, the fifth session in this series, because making the most of your customers and clients that you already have and getting that loyalty or subscription is the best way to be able to get repeat business. You don't have to keep on selling. It could be one of those quick wins. It could be one of that magic, that dark blue that Van was talking about.
no, that's so great. There's an upcoming webinar on that.
Mhm.
It's actually just occurred to me that across all the other upcoming webinars for the Reboot series, you might even be able to map this on the model. So you know in which month you're going to have an opportunity to review some of these as well.
Absolutely. So thank you for letting me interrupt there. You were talking about tab
No
4 and
worries.
5.
Yes. And so it's no surprise that the whole of the right-hand side of the business model is about everything that generates your revenue streams, which is why the financials for your customers and value propositions are also on the right-hand side. And then on the left is how do we actually deliver on those value propositions and get them to our customers. So that begins with number 6, which is what are the key resources and assets and capabilities that you need? They might be physical resources as well as technological, as well as IP, and anything else that's part of your secret sauce. Number 7 starts to reflect what are the key operational processes that are involved in producing your products or services. And number 8 highlights any external dependencies that you might have on third parties or partners to enable you to bring that value proposition to life. And as I mentioned, all of these areas on the left, so from 2 to 6 to 7 and 8, all of them reflect the key costs in your business that are captured in the bottom left-hand box as well. So hopefully that gives you an idea of how to use the business model canvas and how to map business processes as well as customer products and value propositions and how they drive your internal costs as well as your revenue.
Van, there was just a question that popped up on the chat. Does this chart have colors too? And I'm going to say no, because this is after you've had the previous one. The colors are how you action it to get to this point. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. So this represents all the new changes that were made. And the slide before, if we can go back one slide.
So let me go. This was our pre-pandemic business model. And then this is where Van has highlighted them into these 4 categories at the bottom. And then once the changes have happened, there's no more colors because there's no more mayhem because you've solved it.
That's
no
right.
more misalignment because you've solved it.
And what you will want to do is after you've implemented these changes and got your business model, remember the step that said decide what the trigger for your next update is. That's when you'll revisit the new model and do the same thing again. Look at what's working, and you might find it's still working for a while, and you may not need to change anything at all, or you'll be able to identify things that need attention. So the key takeaways for us are use the business model canvas for your current state and to map your key changes and challenges and to map your new strategic choices. For anyone who loves version control, having a series of different versions that you can look back on can sometimes also be helpful to identify what we've tried before and what worked really well or what we didn't.
And that might just mean saving it as January 2025, May 2025, and you can look back and see how far you've come. Cynthia, would you mind popping that link in the chat just to make it, you're amazing. She's already popped it in there.
Beautiful.
To make it easy for you to get this. This is a free tool. You can also take a photo so you don't lose where that link is. At the bottom, you'll see we've got that link so you can get this business model canvas.
And for those who are interested in this kind of nerdy stuff, that link is to the website of the people who originally developed the business model canvas, and they've got lots of other great resources there that you can tap into.
I've used these for all sorts of businesses over the year, and I know over the years, and I know you have as well. It's a fabulous tool, no matter the size of your business, to get everything on one page.
Fantastic. All right. So the key takeaways are use the business model canvas. This is also another one for using AI as your strategy intern. You can ask it to put together your business model canvas for you, and you can make any necessary tweaks if you didn't get it quite right to begin with. So even if you did not realize it, every business owner already has a free strategy intern available to them. The next key takeaway is when you're scanning the environment, what you want to look for are your inconvenient truths, your showstoppers, the game changers, and the distractions that go into the no box or the not now box. Sometimes it's a not ever box. Next, feel free to borrow or replicate from what others are doing. And when you're making the strategic choices, focus on the highest impact and those that give you the path of least resistance. Finally, make it a team sport. You don't have to do it on your own, and you're likely to get a much better result having multiple eyes on the situation. So definitely use the expertise that's available, whether it's from those who are closest to your customers internally or from working with experts who may have dealt with these conditions many times before with many businesses, so you're not having to find the best response the first time that you're dealing with things.
Great. Thank you, Van. And as I've just said in the chat, take a photo of this slide because this is a great way to capture some of the gems from today's session. So I'll give you a couple more seconds to grab a photo with your phone and start putting your questions in that Q&A box because we're going there next. All right, while we're going through our questions, let me quickly tell you about what we've got coming up. Next week, same time, same place, is right sizing your team. So that might be growing your team, it might be reducing your teams. How do you know what your triggers are for doing this? And how to have some of these tough conversations. So we have another amazing guest speaker joining with that. You can use this QR code, and Cynthia will also put it, she's already put it in the chat. Thanks, Cynthia. And we would love your feedback to help us shape future sessions. And Cynthia will also pop this link in the chat. So while you're signing up for those, let's have a look at your Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing so you can just see Cynthia and just see Van and myself. And let's have a look at these questions. Would you like me to go through them for you, Van? Read some of these out?
Yes, that sounds great.
Okay, if you have questions, pop them in the Q&A box. We've got 5 here to answer. We've got 15 minutes. So Sharon has asked a question. Can you speak more to vanity metrics? I noticed this one came up earlier in the session. Do you know where we're talking about, Van?
Yes, so these would be, I think these are the things to
Don't get
watch
distracted by
out
vanity
for.
metrics.
Yes, that's it. These are possible distractions.
Yeah, so what's a vanity metric?
Okay, so these will be metrics that show up in news and business articles often saying, this is the key metric to look at. These may be signs that are interpreted externally as things going well in your business, such as having thousands of Instagram followers.
But a really
But
low
then,
engagement or no one's buying?
yes, yep.
Yeah.
And so sometimes the metrics can be too surface level and give us a false
Mm.
sense of security that things are going well. So, for
Okay.
example, having a lot of followers doesn't necessarily mean that people are engaging with your content or product the way that you need them to. So they can be fantastic for what they are designed for, which is marketing and branding. So make use of them for that, but you might not want to rely on them as evidence that your business is performing the way that you want to. So it's just knowing the best way to use them, and just beware the trap. They can make us feel really good in the moment as business owners, but also they can represent a lost opportunity to take things to the next level.
Great. Thanks for that, Van. There's a couple of questions about if this is going to be recorded. Yes, today's session's recorded. Yes, the future ones are recorded, but do sign up because then you'll get an email about it, because otherwise it's so easy to let it get lost somewhere else. So you can get a copy of the slides and a recording, but sign up to the sessions for each week. It just helps you implement those strategies. All right, next question. Jennifer's asking about AI platforms. Now, we can't specifically recommend anything because it's not our area of expertise, and it's not necessarily a recommendation from the City of Sydney or Service New South Wales. However, since you've popped this question in, there has been a lot of conversation in the chat about who's used what platforms and how they've used it. So Jennifer, have a look in the chat, copy those down, and I think that will really help you with your AI platform questions.
You could also just do a little bit of quick research on the platforms that are being most used by your particular industry.
Great comment. Thank you, Van. So there's a question here from someone about why is the map in the order it is if the best order to do it is different? Does it translate to another document? So you'd be talking about the business model canvas. Yeah. Go for it, Van.
And so there's an order for filling it in because it's just easier as a business owner to go through that sequence, to start from customers and then start with the who and what, and then work to the how. But the reason why it's visually presented in this way is that we want to have our costs on the left-hand side, our revenue earners on the right-hand side, but also the key touch points. You'll notice that key partners are on the very left, which are our dependencies on the cost side, if you like. This is on top of staff, of course, and then customers on the right-hand side, so that it somewhat reflects all the inputs into your business on the left, and all the outputs in terms of resources and people as well. So it's designed to, yeah, just help structure that, that thinking to make it easier to think through. And that is why also value propositions are right in the middle, because that is where what you're creating meets where the value is being generated.
Mhm. Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, our next question. Let's have a look. I'm trying to get a variety of different questions here. I've got a question here from Tread Right Podiatry. Would you recommend we create many business models for different parts of our business or just one? For example, one of our employees, then one for our services and one for marketing.
So within each function inside of your business, if you wanted to, each of those functions could treat themselves as a business inside a business. So if you're, sorry, what were the areas again? There was marketing and...
One for employees, one for services, and one for marketing.
Okay, so for employees, for example, if you wanted to treat your employees as a business in themselves, you could fill this out for each one of them so that they could identify what's happening. So for your employees, for example, their customer segments might be the business owners or the managers of the business, and their key partners might be the internal systems and processes that they're using. So for example, if you are a business that uses Xero, Xero might be a key partner for your employee team. And again, with marketing, the key partners for marketing might be different technology providers, and their key activities will be different to others. So there's no reason why you can't use this for each function inside your business. And for more larger complex businesses with a range of products and services, they have used this for each customer segment or for each particular product family. So it can be used in that way as well.
Yeah. And Hayley, I would say too, if you haven't done one before, just do one for the business first. And then if you want to do further, you can get meta and make it as big as you like. Sometimes we get very excited and we spend a lot of time in the detail. We're really just having one and one page might be the great place to start, but only you will know the answer to that one.
Yeah.
Okay, question here. The case study focused on a B2C business, which is a business to consumer business. What advice do you have for completing the template as a B2B business, which is a business to business?
Okay, so this is, I wonder if we can jump back to the Uber
One moment.
business model canvas, because that might be a really great example to go to. And so this is fantastic for when there are
This one?
potentially, yes, fantastic. So this is a great example for when you potentially have multiple customer segments that you're working with. So on the right-hand side, you will see there that there is the B2C part of the Uber business model, which are your busy professionals, students, and young adults, families, and households. But the B2B part of the Uber business model are the restaurants. And so if your business model is one that is B2B, you can still use it in the exact same way. And if your B2B customers are from different sectors or industries, you might want to do one for each sector. But it's also perfectly okay to be able to identify who your B2B customers are. Everything else in the business model canvas should still work exactly the same.
Great. Thank you, Van. We do have a comment here asking for some more workshops or webinars for online service business, such as coaching and counseling. This is great feedback. If you can go into the chat where it says, give us your feedback, pop it on there, which makes sure we collate it in one spot. And then when we're looking at our next topics, we can get it all in there. So thank you very much for that comment. Please fill out the 2-minute feedback form. The link is in the chat. All right, we have a question from Elise. Do you have any good AI prompts to get the best responses to our business-related queries, or places research where we can find prompt tips?
There are so many. There are so many out there. I am by no means an expert in this area, but I suppose my key recommendation is wherever you start will be okay. It will still give you a response that is less effort than having to come up with things yourself. So with all new technologies, it can be anxiety ridden in terms of choosing the right one. It's okay to just start anywhere and keep adapting as you go, because right now the goal isn't to find the perfect tool. It's to get your strategy in a good enough state so that you can make the decisions. So when we're talking about, and I haven't used the term in this webinar yet, but when we're talking about minimum viable strategy or minimum viable strategy update, it is really what is the smallest bit of support or help you need so that you can get it on a page to represent your business, even if it's a 70%, 80% representation. That can be good enough because you're going to use other people to help identify gaps and fill in whatever you might be missing. So anything will help to start off with, and you will know better than anyone else whether the responses need a bit more tweaking. No AI is going to be able to perfectly capture your business. But then again, that's where your competitive advantage is, in knowing where your business is at and what's unique to what you do.
Yeah, wonderful advice. And Lisa, you can always just ask AI, what are good AI prompts? I think, yeah, just start. And then we can perfect things as we go along. All right, we have time for one last question. It's going to have to be a very quick answer because we've got 2 minutes left. This question is, I co-own a home fragrance, which is candles, diffusers, room sprays, and gift boxes business. We've been in business for 5+ years, and we don't have much sales at all, around 5,000 a year. We're thinking of simplifying products and rebranding. Do you think rebranding as a strategy would help business?
So if your customer feedback and your internal team feedback is that the brand is part of the reason why you're not generating as many sales as you'd like, then that would be a really good response. It can be tempting to start with possible things you can do and to see whether they might solve the problem. See if you can insert a step where you can look to some data from customers or the industry to try and identify what is giving your customers, existing customers, a reason to buy, but also for the customers who aren't buying, why is that? So that you can properly identify the degree to which brand is part of the problem. Is it just that it's not getting enough cut through? Or are there other reasons there? For example, your brand might be really strong once your customers get access to it, but they might not be seeing it much in the places that they're looking. And so hold on to that possible solution, but let's validate that that's going to be the best bang for buck for you, as opposed to other potential reasons that may also be there.
Great advice. And for this person, it's anonymous, so well, you know who you are. I'd also say just think about why you want your business. Is it because it's a hobby that you want on the side and you enjoy it, or are you wanting to make a really good income from it? And they will influence 2 different decisions. All right, so that brings us to right on 1 o'clock, and we got through all our questions, Van. So
I'm so glad they were great questions.
They were wonderful questions. So thank you everyone for coming today for today's session. As you can see in the chat, there are 2 links for you to have a look at. One is to join for next week's session, which is about right-sizing your team, which could be hiring people or reducing staff numbers. And we'd also love feedback on how this session was for you and how we can improve in future sessions. Feel free to share this link and invite colleagues. It's a great resource, and let's make the most of it so we can help support each other's business. And thank you very much, Van. And I look forward to seeing everyone next Tuesday for the same time. Great. Thanks, everyone.